Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Continuing Canto 11, Chapter 11, Text 21. Translation. Coming to this conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul, and thus cease one's material existence. Far out, huh? Material existence. The mind should be fixed on me, since I am all-pervading. And Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. After coming to this conclusion of knowledge, you should remove the misconception that the material body is the self. And you should fix your mind upon me, the all-pervading Lord, and thereby free yourself from material existence. BBT purport reads, although in previous verses Lord Krishna has described the lifestyle and approach of the impersonal philosophers who meditate on the distinction between matter and spirit, the Lord here rejects the path of jnana, or speculation, and comes to the final conclusion, Bhakti Yoga. The path of jnana is interesting only to one who does not know that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 7.19. Do you know the verse? Bahunam jamanamante Gyanavan mam prapadyate. What's the rest? Vasudev sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. Very good. You were just testing me to see if I knew the verse. The word Vasudeva Sarvamiti, or Vasudeva is everything, are similar to the words Sarvaga found in this verse. One should know why the personality of Godhead is all-pervading. The first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam states, Shanbhadyasya yataha, Bhagavatam 1:1:1. The Supreme Lord is the source of everything. And, as stated in the previous verse of this chapter, he creates, maintains, and annihilates everything. Thus, the Lord is not all-pervading in the manner of air or sunlight. Rather, the Lord is all-pervading as the absolute controller, who holds in his hands the destiny of every living entity. Interesting explanation. I'll read it again. Thus, the Lord is not all-pervading in the manner of air or sunlight. Rather, the Lord is all-pervading as the absolute controller, who holds in his hands the destiny of every living entity. Paragraph. Everything is ultimately an expansion of Krishna, and therefore there is really no other object of meditation besides Krishna. Meditation upon any other object is also meditation on Krishna, but imperfectly performed, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita by the words avidhi purvakam. The Lord also states in the Gita that all living entities are on the path back home, back to Godhead. Because of ignorance, however, some of them go backward or stop along the way, foolishly thinking that their journey is finished, when in fact they are suspended in one of the minor potencies of the Supreme Lord. If one wants to intimately understand the nature of the Absolute Truth, one must take to the path of love of Godhead, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 18:55. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. Bhaktyamam abhijanati. You know that one? Yavanyasyasmi tattvataha. Sounds familiar? Tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as He is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. The words Nanatva Brahma in this verse, that's the Bhagavatam verse, indicate false identification with the gross and subtle material bodies. The word B-H-R-A-M-A-M, Brahman, indicates a mistake. It can also mean, quote, wandering or rotating. The conditioned living entity, because of his mistake of falling into illusion, is wandering through a succession of material bodies, sometimes appearing as a demigod and sometimes as a worm and stool. The word uparameta means that one should stop such fruitless wandering and fix one's mind on the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, who is the true object of everyone's love. Such conclusion is not sentimental, but is the result of keen analytical intelligence or analytic intelligence, jigyasaya. Thus, after elaborately explaining to Uddhava many aspects of analytic knowledge, the Lord now comes to the ultimate conclusion: Krishna consciousness, pure love of Godhead. Without such love, there's no question of eternally fixing one's mind on the Lord. Paragraph. Quoting from Viveka, Srila Madhvacharya states that Nanatva Brahmam indicates the following illusions, such as considering the living entity to be the supreme, considering all living entities to be ultimately one entity without separate individuality, considering that there are many gods, thinking that Krishna is not God, and considering that the material universe is the ultimate reality. All of these illusions are called B-H-R-A-M-A, Brahma, or mistakes. But such ignorance can be eliminated once by chanting the Hare Krishna, the holy names of Krishna. You know this one? Go ahead. You memorized it. Very good. Okay. Now, Bhaktisiddhanta's purport is much shorter. As long as one considers the body as the self, various misconceptions will pollute his mentality. By full engagement in devotional service of the Supreme Lord, one gains respite from the endeavors of sense gratification, being resolute in his determination to use everything for the Lord's satisfaction. The acceptance of anything as not being related to the Lord, and thus meant for one's sense gratification, is the cause of material bondage. One should, therefore, avoid this misconception by coming to the true conclusion of knowledge that the Supreme Lord is the sum total of everything. This description is gives a nice picture of how the knowledge aspect of bhakti fits in with bhakti. Or knowledge aspect minus bhakti doesn't bear fruit. Bhaktisiddhanta's summary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary. The conclusion of knowledge is herein being described. To identify with one's gross and subtle bodies, to think that the innumerable living entities are ultimately one, and to think that human beings and demigods possess different types of souls. These are all misconceptions. One should give up such misconceptions by the process of devotional service and fix his mind on the Supreme Lord. In this way, one will attain realization of the personality of Godhead on the strength of his knowledge and devotional service. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 18:55, the same verse we quoted, Bhaktyamam Abhijanati, etc. One can understand me as I am, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service, and when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, Vishate Tadanantaram, he can enter into the kingdom of God. Now, Vishwanath's commentary reads, coming to the conclusion of all knowledge, one should give up the false conception of material variety that one imposes upon the soul, and thus cease one's material existence. The mind should be fixed on me, since I am all-pervading. Paragraph. The Lord summarizes the path of Gyan, discarding false conceptions of variety concerning the self, namely the gross and subtle bodies of the Devata and human by deliberation, jigyasaya, as described above, fixing the mind devoid of contamination of Maya, virajam, in me by bhakti, one attains sayuja with me, uparameta, by vijnana arising from that bhakti. It is said, same verse, Bhaktyamam Abhijanati. Okay. Srila Jiva Goswami's Krama Sandarbha refers to Bhakti Sandarbha, which discusses, having stated that Gyan is perfected by Bhakti, Gyan is summarized. The deliberation in this verse was described in the first verse. That's Bhagavatam 11:11:1. So the first verse of this 11th chapter. One cannot actually say that there is bondage or liberation due to the gunas controlled by me, because the relationship with the gunas arises only by avidya or ignorance. There is no real bondage, and consequently no liberation. That is my opinion. Na me moksho na bandhanam. In this verse, Atmani means in the pure jiva, unquote. Rejecting the illusion of variety constituted of devatas and humans in the Atma, concentrating the mind on me, the all-pervading Sarva Ga Brahman, by hearing my pastimes, one should become peaceful. Okay, we're being told we should become peaceful. So in case you're not peaceful, better go read Uddhava Gita. Here's a nice illustration. Can we go full screen? No, the other way. There we go. Because of ignorance, however, some of them go backward or stop along the way, foolishly thinking that the journey is finished. when, in fact, they are suspended in one of the minor potencies of the Supreme Lord. If one wants to intimately understand the nature of the Absolute Truth, one must take to the path of love of Godhead. She's an artist, trying to convey the message in words, in images. Okay, so we'll read a little bit further. It's not too long. Text 22. My dear Uddhava, or my dear anybody who's listening to this class, if you are not able to free your mind from all material disturbance and thus absorb it completely on the spiritual platform, then perform all your activities as an offering to me without trying to enjoy the fruits. Sounds like chapter 12 Bhagavad Gita, doesn't it? Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. My dear Uddhava, if you cannot detach your mind from the objects of the senses and thus absorb it completely in me, then offer the results of your activities to me without considering the fruits of your labor to be your personal property. That was a question yesterday evening from one of Raghunandan's group after our visit there. Is it sufficient? Is it okay to just do your duty? I mean, it's okay. It's the activities stay on the material platform, and if that's all one can do, that's what one can do. But even with that instruction in Bhagavad Gita, try to understand the self, become fixed in knowledge of the self. You know, the soul. Okay. When you print these front and back, could you number them? Okay, so more of Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, I think. Maybe. As long as one considers the body as the self, various misconceptions will pollute his mentality. Same as Rishabhadev's teachings, karmatmakaye and sharirabandha. The mind becomes polluted. By full engagement in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, I don't need that. I put it down for a reason. By full engagement in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, one gains respite from the endeavors for sense gratification. That's 21 again. We're at 22. Sorry about that. So back to the BBT purport for 22. BBT purport. If one offers one's activities to Lord Krishna without trying to enjoy the results, one's mind becomes purified. When the mind is purified, transcendental knowledge automatically manifests, since such knowledge is a byproduct of pure consciousness. When the mind is absorbed in perfect knowledge, it can be raised to the spiritual platform, as described in Bhagavad Gita 18:54. Brahmabhuta verse, you know that one? Brahmabhuta prasanatma, na sochati na kangsati, samak sarveshu bhuteshu. You're reading it, okay. Mad bhaktim labate param. Translation: one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman. He never laments, nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Unquote. By absorbing the mind in the transcendental form of Lord Krishna, one can surpass the stage of ordinary transcendental knowledge. There's extraordinary and there's ordinary transcendental knowledge, by which one simply distinguishes oneself from the gross and subtle material bodies. Spiritually enriched by loving devotional service to the Lord, the mind is completely purified of all tinges of illusion. Through intense concentration on one's relationship with the personality of Godhead, one comes to the highest standard of knowledge and becomes an intimate associate of the personality of Godhead. Paragraph. By offering one's activities to the personality of Godhead, one purifies one's mind to some extent, and thus comes to the preliminary stage of spiritual awareness. Yet, even then, one may not be able to fix one's mind completely on the spiritual platform. At that point, one should realistically assess one's position, noting the lingering material contamination within the mind. Then, as stated in this verse, one should intensify one's practical devotional work in the service of the Lord. If one artificially considers oneself to be supremely liberated, or if one becomes casual on the path of spiritual advancement, there is serious danger of a fall down. Paragraph. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the Lord previously explained to Uddhava Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Now, sometimes it was just saying Jnana Yoga, sometimes it was saying Jnana Bhakti, now it's Jnana Mishra Bhakti. But according to Jiva Goswami, the Lord previously explained Jnana Mishra Bhakti, or devotional service mixed with impure desire to enjoy transcendental knowledge. In this verse, the Lord clearly reveals that transcendental knowledge is an automatic byproduct of loving service to the Lord. And in the next verse, the Lord begins his explanation of pure devotional service, which is completely sufficient for self-realization. The desire to enjoy spiritual knowledge is certainly a material desire, since the goal is one's personal satisfaction and not the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, Lord Krishna here warns Uddhava that if one is not able to fix one's mind in trance on the spiritual platform, then one should not go on simply theoretically discussing what is Brahman, what is not Brahman. Rather, one should engage in practical devotional service to the Supreme Lord, and then spiritual knowledge will automatically awaken in one's heart, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 10:10. Tesham satati yuktanam. You don't know slokas, huh? You know some. Okay, you know that one? Tesham satat. You don't look at you don't know it. Okay. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami bodhi yogam tam yena mam upiyanti te. Those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. There's a long purport. Paragraph. Similarly, in the 10th Canto Bhagavatam, Lord Brahma warns that one should not neglect the auspicious path of bhakti and instead take up the useless labor of mental speculation. By mere philosophical speculation, one cannot fix one's mind on the spiritual platform. Many great philosophers throughout history had abominable personal habits, which proves that they could not fix themselves on the spiritual platform by mere speculation or philosophical categories. If one is not fortunate enough to have executed devotional service to the Lord in one's past life, and if one is therefore addicted to more speculation on the differences between matter and spirit, one will not be able to fix one's mind on the spiritual platform. Such a person should give up useless speculation and engage in the practical work of Krishna consciousness, absorbing himself 24 hours a day in the mission of the Supreme Personality Godhead. In such missionary work for the Lord's sake, one should never try to enjoy the fruits of one's work. Even though the mind is not completely pure, if one offers the fruits of one's work to the Lord, the mind will quickly come to the standard of pure desirelessness, in which one's only desire is the Lord's satisfaction. 2 more paragraphs and we're going to end. Srila Jiva Goswami states that if one does not have faith in the personal form and activities of the Personality Godhead, one will not have the spiritual strength to remain perpetually on the transcendental platform. In this verse, the Lord is definitely bringing Uddhava and all living entities to the conclusion that of all philosophy, pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Krishna. I see. Okay. In this regard, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that one who is bewildered by false ego may not want to offer his activities to the Supreme Personality Godhead, even though this is the actual way of rising above the influence of the modes of material nature. Because of ignorance, one does not know that he is the eternal servant of Krishna, and instead is attracted by the duality of material illusion. One cannot become free from such illusion by theoretical speculation, but if one offers one's work to the Personality Godhead, one will clearly understand his eternal transcendental position as a servant of the Lord. I mean, this is really clearly, Bhagavad Gita 201. It's that devotional service chapter, just expanded. I guess we're meant to read them sequentially, and we can appreciate how elevated is Arjuna. I mean, how elevated is Uddhava. They're both cousins of Krishna, but Uddhava's just especially fortunate. I mean, not that Arjuna is not fortunate, but Uddhava is especially fortunate. Okay. So I'd like to discuss a little bit, and I hope Sri Radhika's listening. That question that she asked, I've been pondering on it, and it's coming up again. I mean, immediately connecting to what's here. Can you read the question again exactly the way she presented it? I mean, I could try to paraphrase. There's, you found it. That was quick. Wow. Okay.
The repeated The repeated references to a cow. The repeated references to a cow being useless if she's not providing milk seem very harshly utilitarian to me. This is the same argument used by some to slaughter cows after their reproductive phase of life. There also seemed to be an innuendo devaluing women who do not produce qualified offspring. I cherish Vedic literature for its recognition of the inherent value of every living entity, rather than assigning worthiness based on externals. Without hustling for worthiness or belonging, there is a place for everyone in Krishna's heart and home. Am I using modern context to analyze Shastric statements that do not fit such a lens? Will you please comment?
That do not take such what?
Am I using modern context to analyze Shastric statements that do not fit such a lens?
Such a lens.
Lens.
There's lots of things. Lots of things to say about this. The Bhagavatam is a bit of an iconoclast. The Bhagavatam is a bit of confronting worldly sensibilities of right and wrong and virtue and this and that. I mean, Bhagavad Gita also, because the virtue of nonviolence is being flipped to the virtue of violence, appropriately administered. But here in the Bhagavatam, I mean, there's many items that seem to be denigrated. The Vedas that don't glorify Krishna is the main one. And then the other examples that two of which she pointed out, but there's other examples. So, might there be other ways? Sure, there might be other ways. Then how to understand this? I mean, another one that really rubs people. And unless you're engaged in devotional service, you have no good qualities. Now, certainly people have good qualities. But the good qualities are not, they're manifest temporarily, and then they're withdrawn, and then comes another something, and then another something, and maybe another good quality, or another something, or a bad quality, or a bunch of bad qualities. It's not the sustainable or the reality of the living entity. Harava bhakta shukato mahadguna. Abhakta. Those were abhaktas. Harav abhaktashu kato mahadguna. They don't have good qualities. Now, there's so many things to say about this. What is it? How do we understand that? What's a real good quality? What's reality? What's real? And what's real is that which is eternal. That's Sat. And that which is not Sat is Asat. Now you see it, now you don't, whatever it is. It's not substantial. It's very similar to how this whole chapter begins. About, we just read the verse again, 11:11:1, where the vidya and avidya potencies, or the soul being or becoming liberated, it's a misleading notion. The soul is already, like Krishna, is already liberated. The soul is already liberated. But then to say becoming liberated or becoming conditioned, that's an upadhi, and it's not who we really are. So reality distinguished from illusion. That's the very first verse, 111 Bhagavatam. This Bhagavatam establishes reality distinguished from illusion. So in order to establish reality distinguished from illusion, there's sometimes, sensibilities need to be confronted. The confrontation of what goodness is, or what happiness is, or what virtue is, or what anything is. And the Bhagavatam, in most cases it does it gently, but some cases it does strongly. And when it does strongly, then one may feel, ouch, my sensibilities are being trampled on. There's so many of those things. I mean, bhakti, this verse that's quoted several times, bhakti only by devotional service. Well, wait a minute. There's lots of people doing virtuous things that aren't devotional service. So what about those people? You're just like dismissing them. That's not nice. And it's Krishna's words we're not doing. So even here, it's karma yoga. So if you can't do that, you do this. Work without the intention. This is all about intention. Without the intention of being the enjoyer, you offer the results to Krishna. And that way, the mind becomes purified, and that way the natural knowledge of Krishna awakens within. I mean, it's not a mechanical, in that sense, automatic, but it's a natural process. That is to say, the natural process, the unnatural process, is trying to be the enjoyer of what we're not meant to be the enjoyer of. And then consciousness the mind becomes polluted, and consciousness becomes polluted, intelligence becomes polluted, the whole thing becomes distorted. And it's not real happiness, and it's not real knowledge, it's not real anything. So now take all these other things. Women that don't bear nice children, or cows that don't bring milk. Why are those being? Because they're sacred, or they're, the whole Vedic culture is protect women and children, cows and Brahmins. So the Brahmins are also being, dismissed. Sat karma, nipano, vipra, mantra, tantra. So supposing one knows all those Brahmana things, and they got it down, and they're really good at it. They're not spoken of as highly as a person who is a swapacha, a dog eater by birth, and then, but they become devoted to the personality of Godhead. So, in contrast to teachings that are espousing morality and virtue and goodness, compassion, and somebody was sending to me, this is for example, some people that they're really into cow protection. Now, that's very nice, but that cow protection, whether the cow gives milk or doesn't give milk, the cow protection that doesn't lead to God consciousness, Shrama eva hi kevalam. Now, it doesn't mean, okay, go ahead and abuse the cows, any more than saying, okay, go ahead and abuse the cow that doesn't give milk anymore. It's okay, because she doesn't give milk anymore, and they're quite utilitarian. We're only interested in what the cow gives us, and if the cow stops giving us, chop her. It's not speaking like that. It's not advocating that. But there's an intent for the Vedas, for cow protection, for family life. There's a purpose behind it. Now, supposing the purpose behind it doesn't become possible for some reason, there's no children in a marriage. It happens. There's no children in a marriage. So what does that mean? Like, the wife dumps the husband and the husband dumps the wife because there's no children in the marriage. I was just listening to Prabhupada just yesterday, describing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the reason why he underwent renunciation was for the welfare of others. It was his transcendental compassion to bring Krishna Bhakti to the world, which would not have been as easy in the role of a householder as it was in the role of a sannyasi. At least that was the ostensible purpose. I mean, I don't know why he transcendentally speaking, he could have taken his wife and mother to Puri and, spread the Hare Krishna movement with his wife and mother by his side in Puri. Or take them to Vrindavan. So was it necessary to take sannyas to do what he did? He did what he did because it was a sacrifice. I mean, he did what he did because his students were making offense by their ignorance. So Prabhupada quoted a verse by Chanakya Pandit saying, according to Chanakya Pandit, if the wife is harsh and the mother is something else, then, better to go to the forest, because that's better than staying in that forest of so-called family life. No, it's not advocating being irresponsible. Prabhupada just doesn't advocate that. But what is that? What is anything? What's reality? And what's the spirit of renunciation? Well, the spirit of renunciation we know from Rupa Goswami, engaging everything in Krishna's service. So we engage cow protection in Krishna's service. We engage taking care of a wife, even if she doesn't bear good children. We value that, but there's a purpose behind that. The purpose behind that is make offerings to Krishna and please Krishna. And if that, the attraction for the topics, Vishvaksena Kataruchi, Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam, if there isn't attraction for the topics of Krishna, useless. I mean, it's harsh sounding. But it's meant to elevate the significance of the purpose behind life. And if that purpose behind life, it's that same example of thrashing husks, that the rice has already been removed, their chaff. The rice has already been removed. The purpose of the thrashing is to separate the grain from the chaff. The purpose of life is to awaken attraction for the topics of the personality of Godhead and develop affinity for Him. So if other things are done, including reciting the Vedas, and including protecting cows, including caring for one's wife, and so forth, if the fruit is not achieved, you're missing something. So it's saying it strongly. It's saying it strongly. Prabhupada used that technique a lot. Rascal. So now, I hope Sri Radhika's listening, and if she is, she can add some further comment to this. I want to ask Prema Trangani made some comment after class on this topic, and then we'll just go into open discussion. Do you remember what you spoke yesterday? Something along those lines.
Yeah, I was saying that
There's something bad with this sound. Do you know how to fix the sound? It sounds muffled. Like we got a gag over her mouth or something. And it's not her mouth, it's the sound system. The settings for somehow. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was saying that it does sound harsh, some of these statements, considering the modern context. But when we consider the whole Vedic paradigm, the whole Varnashram system and so on, although certain statements were made and distinctions were made and so on, which sound kind of judgmental, now it's gone.
He's got another
Yeah.
control system over there.
But really, as we know, the whole Varnashram system, the Vedic culture, was based on the central goal of God realization and self-realization. So even though sometimes these seemingly black and white distinctions were made or statements were made, it's not coming from a place of harshness or condemnation, but rather it's elevation. Yeah. And I often think about this because there was such faith and value in people had this deep understanding about what is piety, what is impiety, and so on. So there was a certain kind of humility around it too, that even when somebody didn't have a child or something, they felt humble about it, actually, because they knew that it's like lack of some piety, So there was a certain level of acceptance around that whole thing, and it's not that people reject it, but it's just kind of like a known thing that this happened because of lack of piety, because of past sins or whatever. But at the same time, there was acceptance. But in the modern culture, it's very different.
Yeah, the sense of piety, the sense of the support behind life and well-being in life is missing. You said it a little differently yesterday. I like the way you said it yesterday.
Yeah, it's not coming quite exactly the same way. And one more thing I was saying was also about, of course, in Kali Yuga, we're also traumatized. And many don't have an intrinsic sense of self-worth and so on. So any little thing makes one feel not valued so easily. We're looking for that value so much. There's too much identification with everything that we say and do, and
Take the big picture. What was the comment? Your strong comment you made yesterday is the essence of Vedic culture is, as she said, accepting and nourishing and appreciating, and that's the big picture. And when you take the big picture, and there's this sound vibration over there, where does it fit into the big picture? It's not dismissing the big picture. It doesn't override the big picture. The big picture is the big picture. The whole of the Vedic wisdom is very accommodating, accepting, and appreciating. So why is it there if that's the picture, the big picture? It's to cut the affinity for, in this, the theme is knowledge that doesn't have messages of Krishna in it. Now, the whole of the Vedas is to bring one to the position where there's attraction for the messages of Krishna. But just as Vyasadeva was not satisfied, Krishna is not satisfied. And we should not be satisfied. So it doesn't mean we poo-poo the Vedas. Stick out our tongue and make a funny face and wiggle our thumbs in our ears and make, ridicule the rest of the Vedas. It's just not. It's not offending the Vedic literature, and it's not offending or harshness or judgmentalism towards these other examples. It's meant to say, the big picture is the purpose of these of all of life is to enhance our attraction for Krishna and topics in relation to Krishna. That's where our attention should go. And yeah. So let's see if there's some discussion on this in the room or online or anything at all. I mean, anything about this Uddhava Gita topic. Yes, okay.
Maharaj, I don't remember where exactly, but I read Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. He said that there's elevationism and then there's salvationism, but in Vaishnavism, we don't follow either one of those. Can you explain what he meant by that exactly?
It's very similar to this. Elevationism is knowledge and developing a refined sense of discrimination, or morality and virtue and good stuff, philanthropy and altruism, and an elevated person does all those elevated things, with the intelligence and with work, and for society and sacrifices for others. And it's not to say we don't do those things, but we don't do those things in and of themselves. And salvation specifically then is liberation. Let me out of here, this place is crazy. So we're neither elevationists or salvationists. Rather, there's another object or intention behind what we do. And that objective is a bhakti objective. It's Krishna should be pleased. He is the source. We receive everything from the source. With a grateful heart for what we've received, we give back to the source. And others are recipients of that giving back. That's fine, but the essence is giving to Krishna what has been given to us, with love and devotion. That's different than elevationism and salvationism. The intention, the consciousness behind the activity. You have something over here? Microphone.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Like bhakti is the ultimate one which gives all the other things like a knowledge, everything. But as a sadhaka, I may not have that potency to have a high level of bhakti. So I see this knowledge having like a easy knowledge is like an intermediate way to process to bhakti. Like having that knowledge, it helps me to control the mind. For example,
Good.
Like if I know what are the transcendental pastimes of Krishna, I can take the mind there instead of dwelling the mind in a speculative way or some other way. So in that aspect, like is it and like as you also mentioned now, the knowledge and bhakti, if we make the both parallel way, then that makes us the bhakti as the elevator process.
Say the last sentence again.
If I acquire the knowledge and also apply that in the bhakti, is that going to help more towards the bhakti, or just focusing on the bhakti is main process? That's the main process.
Well, but the former, because bhakti isn't sufficiently nourished and developed yet. Therefore, the former. And as bhakti becomes matured and well established, then those endeavors for knowledge wane, and the endeavor then becomes nourishing bhakti, more and more exclusively. You follow?
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. And one can say the same. The way that you phrased the question was really nice. That is, knowledge can then help me direct my mind to those activities instead of, just material worldly things. That means the intelligence can direct the mind. And we just heard Krishna saying that detached work can also help purify the mind. So to see how important the mind is. And, having it oriented and directed properly. There's no question of yoga without a mind that has some control. So the intelligence directing the mind, purification from fruitive work towards sacrificing to Vishnu purifies the mind, which then awakens the natural consciousness of Krishna. It's both mind related, and dhyan similarly. But bhakti takes care of it. Until bhakti is developed, we may focus a little bit more over here, a little bit more over there. But there's, in the more mature stage, there's subsets of bhakti. We can describe it either way. Commonly, Prabhupada does it just, the emphasis is on bhakti. So karma yoga and bhakti yoga become sometimes used almost interchangeably, although there's a distinction. One is a bridge to get to the bhakti, and knowledge is similarly a bridge to get to bhakti. But bhakti isn't dependent upon it.
Yeah.
That's the key. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Online.
Should I ask one question before that?
Sure.
In I think Karma Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami, when he was speaking about rejecting the misconception of variety concerning Atma, and then he said, then fix the mind devoid of Maya upon me. Then he says that the person will attain Sayuja. Like none of the other commentaries kind of said that, but I was curious why he's saying Sayuja, even though he's speaking that fix your mind on me.
I don't know his intention, but I can. When I read it, my thought went to this. In the course of, because it's from Bhakti Sandarbha, so the topic is bhakti. But if bhakti is not well developed, then one may be thinking more in terms of becoming one with than being the servant of. Or detached knowledge and detachment, same as what Krishna has been speaking so far to Uddhava. When there's sufficient detachment from the misconception of the designations of self, and I'm left with the self without designations, then it's Shantaras or Sayuja, or it's when bhakti isn't well developed yet. That's how it struck me when we read it. And then, in other words, in further sections, bhakti's going to ramp up, and it moves dynamically.
There's a couple from Snehavalli. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, I have 2 points. First, the 5 types of ignorance mentioned in the BBT purport by Madhvacharya sounds different than the 5 types of ignorance we usually hear like the ignorance mentioned in the purport can be extrapolated to the one we normally hear. Is this the correct analysis?
My response to this question is there are different models of looking at the same thing. And we need not say if this is right, then that's not. If that's right, then this is not. So it's just a model of looking at things. And is there Shastra Praman to support this model or that model? I don't know if the reference of Madhvacharya is, according to Shastra, these are the 5, or it's his realization, or combination. I don't know the answer to that. But a nice example, Snehavali, about how many material elements are there? And there's different lists. Sometimes it's 8, sometimes it's 24, sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 16. And they're just different models of looking at the same thing. That's the answer.
And the second is, she says, maybe I'm getting Sri Radhika Mataji's question. In the BBT purport, it is very clear that, quotes, gentleman, unquote, never kills the cow. It's only materialists who do think in the utilitarian principle.
Yeah.
Secondly, in the same purport, it's a talk about the unchaste woman, not for every woman without children. Oh, she said not getting. Maybe I'm not getting Sri Radhika Mataji's question. Okay.
Anyway, you and Sri Radhika can have a conversation. Sri Radhika has her, she's on a mission in her personal spiritual life to refine her affective side and be more, appreciative of others and appreciating the Vedic wisdom with a certain labor and so forth. And this language struck her in such a way it rubs against those sensibilities. And she's asking for, am I just being a modern personality looking through that lens, or what? So and your approach and your particular stage of Krishna Bhakti is not the same as hers. You want some clarity as far as the picture of reality and what Scripture tells us the picture of reality, because we're not, that's very special and sacred, and you want to be really clear about that picture of reality that the Vedas are giving us and our acharyas are giving us. But if you want to understand what her question is, and you go have a direct dialogue with her. If we were sitting in a room together, we could do that, in the room, but we're not.
Next question is from Amara. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, one of the statements in today's reading was, knowledge is perfected by bhakti. Could you kindly elaborate on its practical application for aspiring devotees? Thank you.
There are different dimensions of that statement. One of them, just to keep it simple, it's right in the context of chapter 7 through this part of chapter 11. It's primarily speaking of, as we've been hearing, Gyan Yoga or Gyan Mishra Bhakti or something like that. it's not so much bhakti as it is knowledge that brings detachment. And when that detachment becomes clear or more complete, then the obstacle for bhakti becomes removed, and then bhakti becomes more possible. So it's again, keeping it simple. It's a little bit like making wet wood into dry wood before you ignite it. Knowledge and detachment that doesn't ignite bhakti is like making the wet wood into dry wood, and then you bring the match and the dry wood ignites. And that's the bhakti principle. So bhakti is the mature stage or complete stage of knowledge, and it's not yet complete until it comes to the stage of bhakti, or hearing and describing and discussing the activities of the personality of Godhead and its form and so forth.
Next question is from Uddhava Bhakta Prabhu. From yesterday, this is from yesterday. Lord Krishna mentions the supreme nature of his and Balaram's pastimes. Just want to be sure this is not diminishing the nature of Lord Ram's pastimes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Also, if you would like to add anything.
Yeah, I would like to add something. Jiva Goswami puts Ram's name instead of Balaram's name. So don't become disturbed.
And the third question from Snehavalli. The translation of verse 21 says, give up the false conception of material variety. Could you please elaborate on this? Madhvacharya says that we have variety with 2 fingers. So what material variety the verse is talking about? Thank you.
Probably you have listened to Hari Parshad's 3-part seminar on the 9 pillars of Madhvacharya. I've listened to it several times, and if you haven't, please listen, because you'll like it, and it'll clarify what Madhva's position is. Madhva's position is all about differences, or say it negatively. There's no onenesses in Madhva's teaching. It's all differences. So now, material differences, let's do this. He taught consistently Pancha Beda. Pancha means 5, Beda means differences. So one of those 5 differences is there's Prakriti is different from other types of Prakriti. Within the realm of Prakriti, there's differences, and they're real. So when Prakriti is covering the jiva, there are differences of coverings of the jiva, because there's differences of Prakriti within the realm of Prakriti. So when you remove, it's delicate to just immediately take, transition between Madhva's language and Gaudiya language, because there's differences between how Gaudiyas view the soul constitutionally and how Madhvas view the soul constitutionally. He has a view that souls are constitutionally different. It's not homogenized, without going into it too much. So what Madhva means is there are coverings of the soul, and there's differences amongst the coverings of the soul. And there's difference between the covering and the soul. It's all about differences if you're a Madhvite. And there's references made to him because there's certainly some appropriateness to the Gaudiya conception of coverings of the soul. There's different kinds of coverings of different souls. And when that's removed, what do you have left? You have the soul. That according to what this Bhagavatam section is teaching, the soul is pure. There's no question of becoming, because the soul is already pure. You can't become conditioned. You can't become liberated. That's Krishna's words. Although we speak conventionally about becoming liberated. It's just, removing the different coverings. And there's variegatedness amongst the coverings. I think I understood the question. And if I haven't answered the question that you were asking, you can ask it again.
Yeah, the question is, what is the material variety that is being spoken of here?
It's material variety. There's variety amongst matter.
Guru Maharaj, in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, he says discarding false concepts of variety concerning the self. So that's the gross and the subtle bodies, the bodies of Devata and human by deliberation. That's what he's speaking of as material variety. Just the varieties of gross and subtle bodies that we have and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the humans and demigods, it's also material variety.
Mm-hmm.
Anything?
She says, thank you, it's clear.
Huh?
She says, thank you, it's clear.
Oh. Okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Sure.